is my first year here. Oh, we
Oh,
are recording. It is my first year at the Merle Smith campus, and previously I have been a mental health therapist and clinician for about 10 years. So that is my background a little bit. And then I think we were going to have Kimberly and Elliot introduce themselves as well.
yeah, I can go first, and then I think Elliot is actually going to take it away. I am a psychotherapist at St. Luke's. As I like to say, I've been a therapist since the 1900s because I finished graduate school in 1998. And I'm moving more and more full time into doing what's called behavioral sleep medicine, which is a big part of what I'll talk about tonight. Beyond that, thank you very much for inviting me to present tonight. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope it's valuable and informative for everybody who's in attendance.
All right, so thank you for having me as well. So I'm Elliot. I'm the sports and performance dietitian with St. Luke's. So I always remind everyone that a lot of the population that I work with tends to be athletes, whether it's adolescent athletes, if it's masters athletes, if it's weekend warriors. I do work with a lot of athletes, but when I meet with non-athletes, when I talk about that, I like to remind everyone that athletes are humans first, and healthy humans make better athletes. So even though I focus more on athletic performance for most of my job, I really focus on health more than anything else, starting with younger children, because eventually these younger children could turn into the athletes I'm going to work with later. So for tonight, it's not about athletic performance or sports performance or things like that. It's more about how to set a good foundation so that when I get to see them as athletes later, they hopefully have a very good nutrition background to get things going and make it easier for me in the long run. All right, so I just started with how to raise a healthy child. So actually, we can go to the next one because that's where I was going to do my little introduction. So for tonight, what we're going to talk about is how we can try to improve our communication with our children when it comes to nutrition and food, how we can learn more along the way, and how we can teach them what good nutrition looks like, and then we can really show them what the nutrition looks like as well. We're going to talk a lot about being a good, healthy role model for our children. So when I go through the slides, what I'm going to do is talk about a lot of things that I've learned over the years, just working with more people than I can count. So first one I talk about is talk to your kids about food. It's very important when your children are growing up. When they're younger, when they're very young, you know a lot about what they eat because you control every single thing that goes in their mouth. But as they get a little older, they have more autonomy. And with more autonomy, they tend to make more choices on their own. But as parents, a lot of times we're not asking enough questions. So we're not asking enough about what do they eat for breakfast, or what do they have for lunch, or what kind of snacks do they have after school. So going back to what I do most of the time, working with athletes, a lot of times they'll come in and I'll ask them, what's your breakfast look like? And then I'll just get the typical, I don't know, I don't remember. And then they'll look at their parents. Their parents will say, I don't know. I'm not there. I don't know what you're eating. And then we'll go through the day. What do you have for lunch? I'm not really sure. Looked at the mom. The mom doesn't know. They'll turn around and ask the dad. The dad doesn't know. They say, you're the one who's eating it. I don't really know. So as the kids get a little bit older, we give them maybe a little bit too much autonomy as far as what they're eating. We really don't know exactly what they're putting in their body and whether it is a more nutritious choice or a less nutritious choice. So it's important to ask, what are you having for breakfast? What kind of things are you getting at school? What kind of food are you getting after you're done school? What are you eating before you go to practice? And the point of this is not to be, I'll say it multiple times throughout the night. It's not going to be the food police. It's not to judge them. It's not to say that, oh, you shouldn't have that at that time, but it's to use it as more of a teaching opportunity. So it's to learn what they're eating, when they're eating, how they're eating, and then to be able to tell them, maybe we can make a better food choice. If you're going to be going to practice after school, having a slice of pizza is not the most nutritious choice because it's going to make you feel more sluggish when you're working out. Or maybe they're having a donut for breakfast, and it's something that we know is not the most nutritious choice to start the day. So talking about the benefits of choosing other things at that time is going to be really important. So I know as parents, you may not know everything about nutrition. We don't expect you to, but that's why we have the resources like the dietitians who can help with it. Or I'm going to name some websites at the end, which can give you some additional resources where if you're not sure what to tell your child to have for breakfast, or if you don't really know what a good snack is before a workout or before practice after school, I'll provide some of the education material, some of the website resources you can go to, which will give you some ideas for where to find those kind of things to be able to teach your children. And then hopefully you'll learn a little bit along the way as well. So along with that comes getting your kids involved with food. This is really important. And these are my daughters. So this is Gemma. She's the older one. She's 5.5. And then Mackenzie, she's the younger one. She's 2.5. So when I use these pictures, it's just to show from personal experience, it's really important to get your kids involved with food shopping and food preparation. So they're 2 and 5. It's not easy to take them to the store. It's not easy when they're running up and down the aisles and they're picking stuff off the shelves and they want everything they see in the candy aisle. But it really does help if you can take your kids to the store, whether they're 2 or 5 or 15, if you can help educate them as far as where the food comes from, what kind of foods should you choose, and then use it as another teaching opportunity for saying, here's why we're going to choose our wheat bread because it's got more fiber and more protein versus our white bread. And if you're not really sure what that looks like, there are plenty of stores that have grocery store tours with dietitians. I know Weis and Giant, ShopRite, Wegmans, a lot of the bigger grocery stores have grocery store tours with a dietitian. So if you're not sure how to educate your child, you can always ask at your local grocery store, see if they have somebody who will walk you around and explain those kind of things for you. And then once you get home, the important thing is to then get your kids involved with the food, not just having them help put it away, but have them help with the food preparation. So even if it's not, again, the most nutritious choice, you can see in the middle there, she's making pizza. It's flatbread barbecue chicken pizza, but it's something to get her involved with it. She had a great time making it. And then when they're involved with the food, they tend to want to eat it more. And then as you're going through, you'll be able to teach them important life lessons like math. When you teach them how to measure, they'll learn time management. They'll learn how to follow directions. So you'll teach them a lot of other valuable skills along the way, and then they'll know how to cook. I can't tell you how many times I've met with high school seniors or college freshmen who have no idea what to do when they get to the kitchen. So they're only relying on what they can get from the dorm room or what they're going to get from Wawa or Sheets or things like that. So it is really important that you can get your kids involved so you teach them the important life skill that is cooking. And then as you're doing it, if you give them a simple task like cutting up some strawberries, get them those little kids' knives, or if they're old enough, the regular knives, but then have them cutting up food as you're preparing the regular dinner. Have them cutting up some cucumbers or some cauliflower, some strawberries, some bananas. And then as you're doing it, they'll typically snack on those kind of things anyway, because they think of it as more of a little treat. So get them involved in every step of the food preparation process, whether it's shopping or actually making the foods. It will help the more you get them involved. And then be a good food role model. So this comes down to what it says right there. Don't be hypocritical. So if you expect your kids to eat vegetables, you should be eating your vegetables as well. I'm not saying you have to eat, 3/4 of your plate is vegetables, but at least making sure you have some vegetables on your plate so that if you're telling your kids they have to eat their vegetables, then you should be eating your vegetables as well. And honestly, if you don't like vegetables, that's another important teaching point for the kid or your child, where you don't have to necessarily love everything you eat. You may be saying, listen, I don't really like salads either, but I'm going to eat the salad because I know it's more nutritious for me. So that's being a really good role model, is showing them that sometimes we have to make compromises when it comes to the food. And then that goes to drinks. If you're going to tell your child to be drinking water, you shouldn't be drinking juice or soda. If you're going to be telling your child, we're not going to have a snack tonight, we're going to not be having dessert, then you shouldn't be eating that kind of thing in front of them. So make sure you really model what you want your kids to be doing. You should be the example they follow. Kids tend to want to do what parents do. So if you show them what it looks like, they're much more likely to do what they see their parents doing. And then one of the most important things they've done a lot of research on is eating as a family. So it starts with planning. So for my family, what we do is we have an old TV in the kitchen that we just turned into a weekly planner. And along the side, my wife figured out how to use the Fire Stick app to put on our weekly dinner menu. So we try to plan out our meals as much as we can. Now, we don't have every single thing planned out. We may leave it up in the air as far as what vegetable we're going to have, or if we're going to have potatoes, or if we're going to have rice, or little things like that. We may not know every little detail, but we at least have a plan. And then we get our kids involved too. So I'll ask Gemma, what do you want to have for your vegetable with your chicken that night? Or I'll ask Kenzie if she can answer. She'll say what kind of carbohydrates she wants to, or what kind of starch she wants to have when it comes to that other meal. So we'll have most of it planned out, but it's going to give us some kind of structure. And then we get our kids involved. They give us some kind of feedback as far as what they actually want to have. And it doesn't have to be a new meal every single night. It can be one night we have chicken, then we have fish, then we have leftover chicken. So it can be something repetitive. That's okay. But know that you have a little bit more structure to it and write it down so that everyone can see it and everyone gets a little bit more involved. But then busy nights, like tonight being on the call, it was a little bit busier. So we had to have leftovers. Other nights it's going to be busy. We're going to have something made up ahead of time, like something in the crock pot, or have to have a casserole that we can just heat up and go. Or there's going to be nights where we're really, really busy and we have to grab something on the go. But at least if you can plan that out ahead of time, you'll have much more forethought as far as what you're going to be able to have. So if it's the once a week you dine out, grabbing a pizza is not the worst thing. But if it's going to be something happening more often, then we need to figure out, are you going to be able to grab salads? Are you going to go to Wegmans and get those pre-made meals, which are a little bit more nutritious? Are you going to go to Chick-fil-A and are you going to get the grilled chicken sandwiches? So if it's more of a once in a while kind of thing, then we can have a little bit more freedom as far as what we choose. But if we know that it's going to happen more often, then we have to plan out those more nutritious options as well. And then if you can, eat together as a family. I know as busy parents, it's really hard to find time to eat together as a family, but the more often you do it, the better off they're going to be. They've done a lot of research on eating together as a family, and they find that those who eat together as a family tend to have better communication. They do tend to have an easier time managing weight, and they do tend to have less health complications as well. And then when you eat together as a family, everyone tends to eat a little healthier. When you eat with your kids tend to have more variety of the more nutritious foods. And then also they found that parents eat better too when they eat with their children because they want to try to set those good examples. So it's not just good for the kids to have the meals together. You having a meal or a dinner together with your family is going to encourage you to make those better choices as well. So this is just a little example. I used it actually as the background on the previous slide, but it had to get moved. So it just shows what it could look like. So I'm not really sure where this comes from. It has liverwurst on there, which I don't know who eats that, but it has just ideas on here, but it shows you what it could look like. It shows you when you're going to have repeat options. It shows you when you're going to be able to get something for an on-the-go meal, like going out for brunch. It shows you how to plan things ahead of time. So it's just an idea of what it could look like for you to plan meals. This looks similar to what we do with my family, but we just mainly focus on the dinners when it comes to our meal planning. Now, with that, we talk about everything in moderation. This goes back to what I said about not being the food police. So we have to understand that we're not expecting perfection, no matter who I see, whether it's somebody who is, again, an athlete, or somebody who's looking to lose a little bit of weight, or somebody who just wants to improve athletic performance. I always remind them that we're not looking for perfection. If we go looking for perfection, we're most likely going to get ourselves very far off track down the road. So with this, I always go back to a professor that I had at Westchester, and always tells a story about when she was younger, when she was younger and had younger kids. She had a young daughter, and she tried to give her only the best food choices. She tried to eat clean all the time. And it got to the point where she went to pick her daughter up one day, and her daughter said, "Mommy, I did something bad. I was at grandma's house and I ate white bread." And the mom said, "That's not bad. It's okay to eat white bread." She goes, "No, I ate white bread and I liked it." And she goes, "Okay, well, that's not bad." She goes, "No, I really liked it." And she reached in her coat pocket and she pulled out the slice of white bread. She said, "I liked it so much, I took it." And from there on, Professor Subak, just said that she realized you can't be perfect all the time. We're not expecting perfection. She can't expect it from her kids. You can't expect it from your kids. I don't expect it from my kids, but we have to be able to set limitations. So what I like to give everyone is the 80-20 rule. So again, working mostly with athletes, it's 80% of the time you're eating for performance. 20% of the time you're eating for pleasure. So we have to keep that balance of most of the time, every 4 out of 5 times, you make a better, more nutritious choice. Once in a while, once every 5 times, you can choose something that's not the most nutritious foods, but we have to consume those foods in moderation to make it worth it when we have those other foods in the first place. Next slide. And then when we are talking to our kids, we have to really choose our words wisely. So again, going back to things that I've seen and learned over the years, I'll never forget when I was a young dietitian. Within the first few months of starting in my career, I was working at a weight management center, and I had a younger child come in. She was struggling with her weight. She did have obesity. And when I started talking to the mom about how to change certain things like reduce portion sizes and eat more vegetables and reduce the carbohydrates a little bit more, standard things like that, the mom looks right at the daughter and says, "Well, why do I have to make those changes? She's fat, not me." And I was appalled. I had no idea what to say at that point. Again, I was a young dietitian, really didn't know how to address it. And I was speechless and kind of stumbled through the rest of the session. But over the years, I've learned that we have to really tell our kids that we're in this together. So we're not going on a diet. We're not worried because they're fat. Like we talked about before, healthy at any size is very important. Kids are going to change a lot over the years. A lot of times they'll gain weight before they have their growth spurts. So you may be concerned because they are gaining weight more than the rest of their peers, but it could be because they're going to hit a growth spurt and they're going to grow into that kind of weight. So we can't overreact when we see that there are concerns with weight at one point, or if they do seem like they are, starting to gain a little bit more weight than their peers, we have to be able to educate them on why we're trying to eat better. Not because we need them to lose weight. They still need nutrition. They still need to grow. They still need hormone production. But we have to be able to tell them we're eating better because it's going to make us healthier in the end, and talk to them about what happens when we don't eat as nutritious of foods. We tend to have more health concerns down the road. So remind them that we're, again, in this together. Try to stay positive. Talk about not what we're going to cut out of the diet, but what we're going to substitute or add to the diet to make it a little bit more nutritious. So we always want to make sure we choose our words wisely. We don't want to put them on a diet or tell them that they're fat, because at that point it just leads to over restricting, which then really leads to an unhealthy relationship with food. You want them to have a healthy relationship with their food, because if we don't have a good relationship, kids are going to go one way or the other. They're either going to resist it as much as they can, and they're going to eat all the foods they shouldn't because they don't care what you say, or we're going to have the opposite where they become overly restrictive. And that's when we lead into that concern with that disordered eating, because they become too hyper focused with it. So we have to make sure that we're not pushing them in one way or the next. We want to keep their relationship with food as healthy as possible. And then the last thing I always talk about is creating a healthy home culture. So it's not just about talking about the food. Yes, food is a big part of it, but we have to make sure we have our kids set up for success. So a really important thing I tell everyone is to make sure you make your more nutritious foods more accessible. So have fresh fruits and vegetables cut up. Keep those at eye level when they're in the fridge. Keep them on the counter. Put them in clear containers so you see them more often. And then choose the foods that are maybe not so nutritious. Put them on the top shelf. Put them in a container you can't see through. Put them behind other things. So try to make the more nutritious foods more acceptable, more accessible. And then when you are able to reward your kids, don't reward them with food. Not every time they get a good report card, they should be going to Dairy Queen or McDonald's or things like that. Learn how to reward without teaching that food is the treat when that happens. So buy them a book, take them to the movies, take them to the store they want to go to, let them go do a little shopping spree at Target if you can. Give them the ability to spend time with you and do something that's a reward without it being food, so they don't learn that food is always the thing you get when you're good. And then show them that you are more active. Not only be a good role model when it comes to your nutrition, but be a good role model when it comes to activity. So that's Gemma right there. She's out in the garage with me. That's where I do my weightlifting. So she's not lifting weights, but she's helping me move the little 5-pound weights around. When I do my exercising on a Sunday morning and it's nice enough, she'll be out there. She'll be helping me do my sit-ups, and she'll be my arm raises when I do the lifts and things like that. So get them involved with activity. Don't just say go play a sport, but you want to be active with them, so you are setting that good example. And then set routines. So talked about not only what you're eating, but also when you're eating. What time of day should you be focusing on eating a little bit more? Talk about where to eat. We're not eating in our bedroom. We're not eating in front of the TV. We're eating in the kitchen. Talk about when we exercise, when we're a little bit more active. Talk about turning the TV or screens off at a certain point so that we can go to bed at a good time, and then set routines for going to bed. I can't tell you how many athletes I work with that go to bed well after their parents. Their parents have no idea what time they actually go to bed. So to tie this into the sleep part of it, try to set routines where it goes from eating to activity to sleep to screen time. That should all tie together with those routines. So then the last thing is, I mentioned before, the resources. So if you're not really sure how to talk to your children about things we talked about for tonight, or if you want to know more about what are better nutritious choices, there's a lot of good resources on eatright.org, which is from the the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics, and there's myplate.gov and nutrition.gov. They all have many, many, many pages of resources when it comes to healthy eating, and a lot of resources on how to raise healthy kids as well. All right, so thank you. That was my slide.
Hey, remove your hand, yeah.
What?
I'm gonna get a little hostile. Hey.
Okay, Kimberly, you're up. Oh, I think you're still muted.
Okay, yeah, it kept putting me back on mute, but yeah, well, I have to admit I'm pretty excited to hear Elliot's presentation because a lot of what he had to say I'm going to kind of amplify and connect it to sleep. But so I was invited to come and speak about sleep and screen time, and I will tell you right now I can talk about both of those subjects for the next couple of hours. So this is just going to be a couple of points, sort of some take-home points. I think sleep is finally getting the attention it deserves, and it's really fascinating. I think often people are like, how interesting can it possibly be? I'm asleep. But there's so much that happens for us while we sleep. And, probably we would jump out first and say, well, our physical health is important. We understand that sleep and our body getting a rest, we kind of intuitively understand that that's important. But there's so much more. Our cognitive abilities improve, our memory and focus improves, our impulse control seems to improve, and our ability to consider long-term consequences of our decisions improves when we sleep better. We are able to regulate our emotions better, which seems to have something to do with dreaming. We kind of like go through everything that happened during the day and dream about it. And somehow that helps us process it and kind of steel ourselves and get ready for the next day. And kind of related, it helps us have better interpersonal relationships when we're well rested. And the inverse, unfortunately, is true. If we don't sleep well, it can be really hard to tolerate other human beings. So one of my favorite expressions is a good day starts the night before. And that's really making the point of prioritize sleep, understand its value, and realize that that is important as nearly anything we do during the day. Try not to sacrifice it. If however magically the slide can move forward, I don't know how to do that. There we go. Thank you. So what are the recommendations for sleep? American Academy of Pediatrics, if we're looking at the age group 6 to 12, anywhere from 9 to 12 hours of sleep. And then in terms of screen time, they really say no phone. And I tend to agree. We've got some little guys, and no phone means more time to be outdoors, more time to be building social skills. And, not only do they not get access to the social media world as long as they don't have a phone, but the social media world doesn't get access to them. And when we think about some of the privacy that we want our children to have, I think that's an important realization. Age 13 to 18, maybe introducing the phone, introducing screens, things like that. Still looking for 8 to 10 hours of sleep. And then the recommendation, I would say, kind of gradually goes up to maybe about 2 hours of phone time daily. And that's kind of the maximum. So, some days with less than that is kind of lovely. And then why did I put adults on here if we're here talking about students? Because as Elliot was pointing out, kids kind of mimic what their parents do, which I'll talk about in more extensively in a minute. But adults, this is a guideline, not a rule, should be receiving at least 7 hours of sleep per night. There are people out there called short sleepers who don't need that amount of sleep. But please don't try to believe that you are one, just if you don't get that amount of sleep. Most of us need 7 hours of sleep per night, regardless of whether or not we're getting it. And kind of the same limitations about screen time. During personal hours, maybe 2 hours a day. And in particular, something that I can tell you is in my work, I see a lot of is kind of the almost habitually checking of work email. Let me check one more time before I go to bed. Even if I'm on vacation, let me check just to make sure things are going okay. The more that can be limited for adults, the better. If we can move forward to the next slide, thank you. This is a new study. I was so excited to come across this right as I was preparing for this presentation. This study, you'll notice, was just published last month, and it is the results of something called the ABCD study, the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study. And it found a lot of things. I mean, it was very expansive as a study, but a biggie that is one of my take-home points for tonight is that parental screen usage predicts childhood usage. So the idea of I can set a limit with my child that I'm not going to enforce for myself, kind of the do as I say, not as I do. This study absolutely disproves that. It really says your child is watching you and mimicking you. And what it actually made me think of was years ago, probably decades ago, studies about smoking that said what pretty much the number one predictor of whether a child begins to smoke is whether their parent does. It's not messages, it's not advertising, it's not what their peers are doing, it's what their parents are doing. And I think that this study findings here kind of makes that same point with screen time. And then it didn't, that I came across, it didn't say sleep habits are predicted by parental sleep habits, but I would go out on a limb and fathom that to be true as well. So I will say more about that in just a moment. This is going to go back to talking about screen time. Communication, probably the truth with every topic we could touch on tonight. Nutrition, food, exercise, and then also sleep and screens. Communication is key. Having an open line of communication, and that's age appropriate, that's kind of developmentally appropriate. With the younger ones, as you're introducing things like phones, you want to right along with that introduce, okay, here are the limits that we're going to set. Here are some of the habits that we're going to start right from the start. For instance, we all charge our phone outside of the bedroom. Phones don't go in the bedroom. They sit on a charging station in the kitchen. They all sit there together. Everybody kind of puts them there together. It's understood. Great habit to get into. Children with a phone in their bedroom is a bad combination. And that would go, I would say, all the way up to, the day they move out and are on their own. The standard argument that is very, very easy to shut down with children is, but I use my phone as my alarm clock. Yeah, I can get one of those old-fashioned clunky alarm clocks at Target for like $8. So you can just hand them that and be like, next, what's your next argument? There are children that will develop a certain kind of anxiety about not being near their phone. And, I often say as a therapist, sometimes you have to meet their anxiety and raise it a little bit, and say, hey, whatever you're anxious about with the idea of what's going on, if you're not near your phone, we're going to have to work through that. You're going to have to learn to tolerate it. I'm not going to give you this and allow you to kind of believe that you're reassured by having it. So again, for the younger ones, using a separate alarm clock right from the start in their room, no electronics in there. Older kids, as they move into adolescence, have an interesting second issue arise, which is that they truly evolved to want to go to bed later and wake up later than their parents. And if I had time, I would explain the fascinating, I think, reason for that. But effectively, kids, as they develop peer relationships, they do need some time alone without the adults around. But the idea is, okay, so they get to stay up later. The parents are still around and can be woken up if something really, dreadful is happening. But otherwise, it's great for teenagers to have some time later in the night that is really their time. So how to kind of honor that rather than expecting them to follow an adult schedule. One solution that is workable for a lot of these guys is saying, well, shower and prepare for the next day at night. You can stay up later, get prepared for the next day at night, and that allows you to sleep in kind of to the last possible moment in the morning, wake up later just in time for school. Um, Kids are going to often sleep in kind of till the crack of noon on weekends and holidays if they're allowed to. And okay, that's all right. That's probably really what their biological or kind of their circadian rhythm is asking them to do. So what I suggest is what I call sway, which is okay. So if it's like say a 3-day weekend, Friday night they can absolutely sleep in as long as they want. Sunday, they can sleep in later, but get them up a little bit earlier. And then Monday morning, let's say it's a holiday, allow them to sleep in 1 hour later than usual. And that way, come Tuesday morning, their clock is not basically, it's not as if, gosh, you're waking me up at 2 o'clock in the morning asking me to go back to school. It's just a little bit difficult instead of really difficult. So that, again, that's kind of the adolescence that we're talking about. Another issue, so when I work with adult clients, I put down a very firm rule of bed is for sleep, sleep is for bed. And that goes down to some very basic sort of, if you remember Psychology 101, operant conditioning. Our mind associates, different stimulus, an unconditioned stimulus, conditioned stimulus. Basically, if I lay awake in bed, I begin to worry more and more and more. And my brain says, what are we doing here? Am I supposed to be asleep? Am I supposed to be worried? Am I thinking about, the budget? Am I thinking about work tomorrow? Or are we trying to fall asleep? So working with adults, I say, if you're awake and worried, I can't stop you from worrying, but I can stop you from doing it in bed. So get out of bed until you think you can fall back asleep, and then you can get back in. Kids, at least my kids, use their bed as their command center. They do their homework there, they do their socializing there, they do their creative stuff there, and every once in a while they actually sleep in their bed. So it's a little different to say to them, you can only sleep in bed, because a kid's bedroom really is their place. It's where they have their stuff, it's where they live their life when they're home. And so, it takes a little bit of nuance to say, okay, has my child's bed become such a source of anxiety for them that now they're not able to fall asleep? And if you're looking at a situation like that, that might be a place to intervene and actually say, hey, for a month, 6 weeks, how about you move everything to the dining room table? How about you move everything to the empty office? Something like that. And let's make your bed just for sleep. Related to that is also the idea of, as much as possible, to avoid and to teach your children to avoid something that's often termed sleep effort, which is trying to fall asleep, believing that I can make myself fall asleep. I like to say that sleep is like happiness and butterflies. The more you try to pursue it, the more elusive it is. And again, I could talk about this all night long. I will spare you, but trying to, at least not as the first order of business, try to avoid supplements, products, anything you buy that is meant to help you sleep. Personally, I find kind of suspect. I follow something called the grandma rule, which is if my grandma didn't do it, I don't do it. So all of the blue lights, the white noise, the melatonin, the tart cherry juice is the latest one I've heard recently, something called Cock 12, Cock 10, something like that. Anything and everything under the sun probably has a little bit of research basis to say this is going to help you sleep. Okay, but the question that is going to come to my mind is, why do you need help sleeping? What's going on in your behavior, or even in your sort of your cognitive, your mindset, that is making sleep difficult in the first place? Let's address that rather than introducing, a product or a supplement or something, what have you, to try and bring sleep on. A last term that I wanted to introduce tonight for those of you who haven't heard it is something called revenge sleep procrastination, um, which we've all done. You may not have called it that, but you've done it, which is basically saying, you know what, I need to have a bit of a life here. I work, I'm a parent, or I'm a kid, I'm a student, I'm a what have you. And tonight, I'm just not going to sleep because I want to do something fun. I'm going to stay up late and watch a movie. I'm going to drink coffee and just like let myself feel horrible tomorrow morning, whatever. Doing that every once in a while is fine. It kind of makes life interesting. Okay. Doing that on a chronic basis can be a real risk factor. And the research that has been done about this, which I believe research has been done in both China and I want to say Norway, has found that people who engage in chronic revenge sleep procrastination, which basically means sacrificing sleep just to feel like I'm doing something fun or enjoyable or for myself, engaging in that on a chronic basis can be a real risk factor. It tends to be done by folks who already have some risk factors such as ADHD, possibly some mental health, mood lability concerns, things like that. Throw in there sacrificing sleep. And if you remember my first slide, which was saying, here's all the benefits of sleep. So if you're sacrificing all of that and you already have some of these underlying risk factors, you might have somebody who's really putting themselves in some danger. So if this sounds familiar, either something anybody listening is doing themselves or parenting or the guardian of a child who might seem to be doing this, I would say to take it pretty seriously. There we go. Okay, so this is the last slide. Again, I could talk about this for hours, but in a very boiled down way, how do you know when to seek help? How do you know if you or your child needs help related to a sleep issue or a kind of a screen electronic device issue? The two kind of first doors I would knock on would either be your pediatrician, or as if the case might be sort of an adolescent medicine specialist, or a counselor, like a guidance counselor or a family therapist. So which one would I go to with which issue? Which a pediatrician or a medicine specialist.
Kimberly, you're breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure if that's happening for anyone else.
Yeah, it is for me too.
Yeah, I just noticed that. Okay.
Do we want to maybe skip ahead to the oh, Kimberly, are you back? Okay, we'll let Kimberly kind of get situated there for a minute and maybe move ahead to the next slide and come back.
Yeah, let's go ahead and skip ahead.
Get situated there for a minute and maybe move ahead to the next slide and come back. Do one of the counselors want to?
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask, did you want us to take over
Yeah, sure,
here?
go ahead.
Oh, I don't know if it might be easier. Kimberly, do you want to try to mute? There you go. I don't know if there was echoing or not.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I do want to get back to that one little part of her slide at some point. So hopefully we can get Kimberly back online. But Carissa, did you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I will say a lot of, this topic is something that we see a lot of, specifically for me at the high school area, when it comes to those healthy eating habits and when it comes to sleep deprivation. A lot of the kiddos that I see in my office, they come in feeling some anxiety, that time management piece that they're really struggling with when it comes to balancing the schoolwork, the extracurriculars, the jobs, the social life. it's a lot and it can be overwhelming. And at times we see our students sometimes prioritizing some things over that sleep piece, which then trickles into other areas of their life, whether it's, falling behind in schoolwork because they're not getting enough sleep and they're noticing they're maybe a little bit more irritable or things along those lines. And that's why I really think it was so important to really like have the St. Luke's people come in and kind of discuss this, which we're really grateful for because it really is important. And that's kind of my spiel here, but I just wanted to add that from my end at least.
Yeah, and I'm going to just also talk about that. We're seeing this a lot with middle school students as well. I'm sure David and Jackie would agree with that. I'm an advisor as well as the school counselor, and in the morning, I'm seeing my middle school students coming in really tired. Some of them falling asleep right when they sit down. Right before midterms, like a couple weeks leading up to that, I did a presentation on sleep, and we spoke about how getting a good night's sleep consistently really helps you like with your academic performance. And I know that sometimes motivates our students. They're all trying to do their best, but talking to them about how sleep really helps kind of rest the parts of the brain that we really need for those cognitive abilities to keep you focused in class, but able to really retain that information and then be able to, during your test, be able to retrieve that information. So we talked about how that consistent sleep pattern is really going to help them in doing well in school, and just like you talked about, Carissa, with those social situations as well. So that's definitely something we're seeing. We're also seeing it with our athletes as well. Right now is basketball season in middle school, and I can't tell you how many students are coming to find me at the end of the day thinking, I'm so hungry before practice. We're spending a lot of time talking about, like you had mentioned, Elliot, that always and sometimes foods. I've been really trying to have the students, notice how they feel after they eat certain foods. Do you feel like you have energy? Do you feel really tired? We talk about this sometimes, like about food being your fuel for your body and your brain, but also really that self-awareness piece of really paying attention of how you feel, 10 minutes after you eat, 30 minutes after you eat. Are you still energetic by the end of the day? Talking about what snacks you can carry in your backpack that will really help kind of, be if you have an early lunch. I know some of our students' schedules they can't control. Some of our older students are eating at 11 o'clock. And not leaving campus until 5:30 on a game, 6 o'clock. So again, making sure that they have snacks that really can help, give them energy for a longer amount of time. So we're also seeing that in the middle school. And just with those younger students, I think going back to what Elliot and Kimberly were just talking about is making sure that we're modeling those healthy habits and hygiene for our students when they're young, so that hopefully, right, that by the time they're in their adolescent years, middle school and high school and teenage years, that they already have that foundation of, their phones are outside of their bedroom for the most part. Obviously, we could, let those teenagers have some autonomy at night, like Kimberly was speaking, but then really, again, those sleep hygiene of just putting your phone down, turning it off. I had a seventh grade student say all of his friends were talking about how they use their phone as their alarm clock. And he was like, I actually use my your little Google device. So he doesn't have his phone, but he sets his alarm that way too. So I thought that that was a really good suggestion. But yeah, just making sure that we're talking and showing our children those really good, positive sleep and nutrition and screen time limitations so that they have a really good foundation when they're moving into those teenage years.
One thing I really like about working with this counseling team is we are all clinicians by training and by background, happen to be working in a school setting, and we're seeing a lot of the sleep uh, information really brought up conversations that we were having with our middle schoolers this week about their use of Celsius and energy drinks and almost as a social currency or a flex. So talking about that, and we'll be able to have some of these conversations more directly. So it's really great doing a lot of the proactive work, and I think that's something that I really enjoy being at Moravian Academy. Jess, could you advance the slide? So The counseling support that we offer at Moravian Academy is really preventative at its foundation. We do social emotional learning with Mrs. E. Hopefully, we can have her speak about that here in a second. We do parent educations, community outreach in a public sense, but also a lot in our office, even in the parking lot, in the hallway, all over the place. Consultation. So we also have those teacher meetings in those places and maybe even more interesting. And we also meet with students a lot in those places. So it's really in the moment. It's really strike while the iron is hot. And it might be a really brief interaction, or it might be in our office behind a closed door. It might be in the hallway of, or like the stairway of historic downtown, or it might be on the playground. So we really try to be very, very embedded in the classroom, on field trips, overnights, things like that. We're also responsive. So it might be meeting a couple times. It might be meeting once. It might be meeting when there's a big presentation or ahead of it. We also respond to things going sideways on campus and helping get back to kind of a baseline. And also being a member of the student support team, grade level meetings, learning support, and all of those things. So it's really like having a clinician embedded in the school community, and it's really an awesome way to really impact things in a positive way before they become problematic.
Something I'd like to add, just kind of on that responsive end and working with our student support team. So that's something I think I really appreciate within this job too, because we come together, our student support team, at least at the high school, it consists of our learning support specialist, our director, so Dr. Wright. We also have our dean of students, our dean, our grade deans. And what's really, really awesome about that is every week we come together and we talk about each kiddo. And if there's a child who's specifically struggling that week, we all put our heads together and come up with really supportive ways to try and be there for the student, to try and help them succeed as much as possible too. So they don't necessarily always need to have a student support plan in order for the group to really come together and create, whatever we're able to do for that child and that student specifically. It's really special, and it's not something that I have been able to be a part of in other, education settings. And that's something that I think really is special from Moravian. Yeah.
I agree. And one thing we say about Moravian and our faculty, our administrators, our school counselors is that we know our kids. And that's something that we really do take pride in. And then are able to target more of these preventative opportunities because we see what's going on. We try to catch it before it becomes a problem. And again, one of the reasons we're so excited to be in this partnership with St. Luke's for this presentation is because of what we're seeing in terms of sleep and in terms of screen time and eating and nutrition. One thing I wanted to circle back to real quick on the preventative is the social emotional learning and the lessons that we've been doing as a department in the historic downtown campus and at Swain. We've been using Second Step as our curriculum to talk about these preventative type issues, thinking of things like growth mindset. What happens when I make a mistake? How do I reframe that as an opportunity for learning so that I am persistent, so that I can try again and continue to learn? We talk about feelings. What happens in our body when we experience a feeling? How does that influence how I act in a social setting? How can I manage a feeling? What does a coping skill look like? And then we talk about empathy and kindness and ways to build friendships and make friendships. And then problem solving. Well, when something does come up, what can I do about it? How can I problem solve this independently? And when do I ask for help? And what does that look like? What does that sound like? And that's ages preschool, where we do a lot more singing and we do a lot more hands-on activities and puppets, up to at least in my fifth grade is the highest grade that we work with in the lower school, talking about more how can I set up that independence. We talk about using alarm clocks. We talk about coping skills on a more fifth grade level as opposed to our younger kiddos. But they are fun. The kids do seem engaged. And we've seen a difference in terms of how students are talking about feelings and coping with emotions. So that's been exciting.
We're also doing the social emotional learning in the middle school, fifth and up as well. I teach those at the Sweden campus. And just going off of what the other counselors were talking about, I think one of the things I've worked in other schools, bigger public schools in the past, and what I really love about being in a small school, right, is that knowing that baseline of our students. So I'm seeing our students every day. I'm observing, any changes, right? So that's that preventative, like noticing a student coming in feeling really tired, or noticing that you can tell right away that maybe, they're avoiding some certain students because maybe there was a conflict online the night before. So just being able to observe our students and just, again, noticing any changes. We're kind of right there front and center. I'm walking around the campus all the time, saying good morning to every student. So we're really watching and really observing our students to make sure that we are supporting them the best that we can, and just seeing any of those like behavior or mood changes, pulling them aside, like David was saying, in our offices, or privately, to be like, hey, what's going on? I notice that you don't appear, your typical self. So so having that really personal relationship, but also really our eyes and hands are on deck at all times. All right. So tips for families, similar to what Jackie was talking about, emotional regulation, just making sure that we're talking to our children about how they're feeling. I like to really, sometimes when I'm talking with parents, give them examples about validating feelings, but also really separating them from behaviors. A lot of times students will have a really big emotion and they don't know, depending on their age, how to handle those. So also giving them choice, and again, maybe modeling that behavior. I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I'm going to go take a walk, or giving them those coping strategies while you're talking with those. And like Kimberly had talked about, that open communication with our children. Teaching any kind of grounding technique. I like to talk a lot about internal versus external grounding. So for some students, deep breathing's a really positive thing. Otherwise, I will give students who that doesn't feel really great for them, maybe like a 5 sense check. I know we've talked about this on other Zoom calls in the past, but really using our senses, taste, smell, hear, sight, to really help ground them in the moment, which are just another mindfulness technique. This is something that if you have younger kiddos, you can be practicing that with them as well. Just really having them stop and maybe focus on one thing that they can hear outside together, playing games with them, mindfulness games. There's so many great also apps that you could be using, especially if your kiddos are struggling at bedtime, like setting up a really nice routine. Maybe you're doing some mindful movement, or, listening to a calm app together. And again, modeling that emotional expression, like really showing our children how to emote, and talking to them about our feelings and what we do when we're having maybe some of those uncomfortable feelings. Also, similar to food, I don't ever use bad or good emotions or bad or good food. I use uncomfortable emotions versus comfortable ones. Some feel really good in our bodies and some don't. So really making sure that we're talking about that.
Hey.
So there's our contact information for any questions or concerns. If you have something you'd like to discuss about your student, or just kind of want to see what's going on campus, or ask anything, there's our information.
We really do want to consult and be a partner for families. And I think one of the, if I could leave anything with families, it would be maybe we're the contact if someone's having surgery, there's something up, family dynamics, things that maybe are, ooh, should I tell the teacher this is uncomfortable to tell the teacher? It might be maybe through our counseling department and being a conduit to the school, or maybe it's a, ooh, assistant director sounds a little much or not right, and maybe we're a landing pad for that. So we welcome that consultation as well.
Great. I know we only have about 5 minutes left, but if anybody does want to quick throw a question or two in the chat, we can certainly try to accommodate that. And I just want to say thank you so much to our panel of presenters tonight. I really think you guys, gave us some useful information, and this obviously was recorded, and we are going to share this out. So if you're on the call tonight, you'll get those resources. And then for those that were not able to make it, they'll also be able to view a recording with the resources as well.
I'd also like to maybe just open the floor back up to Kimberly if she has anything else. I know she got cut off at the end, so
Thank
I
you.
didn't know, Kimberly, if there was anything that you wanted to add before we went into that as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna hopefully dive in and be able to get this out. But the main thing I wanted to add was also I think parents can be a wonderful resource for each other. And I think one of the things that's special about your community is that it's small enough that there can be a real cultural shift. Kids want to do what other kids are doing. And if there's a cultural shift that says, hey, we limit screen time in this community, we prioritize sleep, we get involved with nutrition, we try, what have you, whatever the topic is. And if the parents can all kind of be like, hey, we're all doing this together, you've got the ability to make that change where I think at some of the much larger high schools, that would be pretty unlikely to be able to really get together and say, hey, nobody at this school does XYZ. But I think at Moravian, there's some potential for parents to really be, and guardians, because I always want to mention many children are raised by people other than biological parents, right? But there's this ability to communicate with each other. And that's another resource for keeping the younger guys healthy. And I would take advantage of that. I made it through without freezing. I'm gonna stop while I'm ahead.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. All right, I don't see any questions. So I think we're good. Thank you all so much for coming. Again, I really appreciate it. And I know our families do as well. So thank you. And thanks to
Thank
our
you.
students, partners, Kimberly and Elliot. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And honestly, as parents, way to show up and, be willing to learn and hear new tips. That's in a busy night, especially a night before a possible snow night. Kids could be a little crazy right now. So thank you for making time and being able to spend that with us.
All
Yeah,
right.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
so much.
Thanks so much. Have a great night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yep.